The name's George. I belong to a merchant caravan, so I'm used to visiting different places. If I can't capitalize on these circumstances, then I'm a fool.
We have one strange Grand Hero battle to talk about today. In the wake of 3 houses sweep of Choose Your Legends, one man rose in the voting polls, and that's going to be the reason for this George Grand Hero battle. Now it may seem a little questionable to have this non-playable merchant be the one paired with our 3 house leaders and Lysithea, but I can't deny that they did a good job making George into a unit. He is definitely a unique reward unit, even if he may not be the most insane free-to-play hero ever. First off, George will be a blue infantry archer. We only have 4 other blue archers in the game, and all of them are 5-star only units. While colored archers may not be everyone's favorites, they can still fill a certain niche if you need to fill a missing color slot. In terms of stats, George has 45 HP, 36 attack, 27 speed, 35 defense, and 29 resistance. He is one tanky boy for an archer, and his 172 BST will be the new highest base stat total for infantry archers. George's 45 HP is second highest for all archers, only behind Varian, and he ties for highest base defense with 35. His attack and res stats are also pretty solid. In exchange, George will be one of the slower archers, so he's definitely trending more toward a tank role. Now, very important development for our free reward units is that they will be able to get access to boons and super boons if they have any. If you want to specialize someone like George, you will be able to in the near future, but it is going to be expensive, so choose wisely. While class type and stats both make George quite unique, he also comes with a unique bow. After the last Grand Hero battle unit, this is a welcome addition. George's bow is called the Daniel made bow, and Daniel is George's brother, who you can actually see in his special attack artwork. For its effect, Daniel made bow accelerates special trigger, which is a universally good perk to have. It will also grant +5 attack to allies within 2 spaces during combat. In addition, it will then inflict -5 attack on foes within 2 spaces as well. So Daniel made bow is a relatively simple weapon. For George specifically, he gets accelerated specials and inflicts -5 attack on foes during combat. For a bulky archer like George, that's a really nice and simple effect, and he can also get some faster specials to make up for his lower speed stat. Now, Daniel made bow will also allow George to support the team with a good old +5 attack to everyone within 2 spaces. The attack debuff effect will also help allies out if George is positioned correctly, so this is a neat little weapon. Pretty much any unit would love some extra attack, and George just has to stand near them to help out. He can easily build around supporting his team, and we will talk about more skill options later on. All in all, Daniel made bow isn't the most complicated weapon ever, but it gives George some combative abilities, and it lets him support the team. It's a really nice bow for a reward unit. Now for other skills, George is going to come with Ignis with 35 defense. That's not bad for some big damage, and it's going to be on a lower cooldown too. For his B skill, he has Show Defense, which inflicts -7 defense on the foe and the enemy team with the highest defense stat. That can increase damage for George and his team, since his bow also supplies attack buffs. Speaking of which, George also has attack opening. This skill grants +6 attack to the ally with the highest attack on your team for 1 turn. In total, George can supply our highest damage dealer with +11 attack, although they do need to stay nearby. George has a decent base kit, and pretty much everything does work together pretty nicely. Since we are getting boons for reward units, we can now discuss the potential for each unit moving forward if you want to heavily invest into them. For George, the neutral nature is going to give him +1 HP, attack, and defense, so overall not a bad thing to keep, especially since George is going to be more defensive anyway. He doesn't come with any super boons, but at +10 merges, his stats do look pretty solid. Without accounting for natures, he's going to have 49 HP, 40 attack, 31 speed, 39 defense, and 33 resistance. If you keep the neutral nature, you need to add the 3 extra stats in each category, and if you choose a boon later on, you can also add in +3 to one of those stats. For George, I would say he could make use of any boon, with speed being the uncommon choice. He could reach some okay levels of speed with a speed boon, but with Daniel made bow being focused on attack debuffs, a defense or res boon would be really nice. A plus attack boon also isn't bad, since 36 base attack is quite good to start with. To be honest, with how rare I expect trait fruits to be, I would say George is fine with his neutral nature. Now for stat comparisons, George has no direct competition since there are no free-to-play blue archers. We can look at other reward infantry archers, and honestly it's pretty crazy. Near's Corin was one of the highest defense archers, but George absolutely outdoes him with a ton more HP and res to work with. George is definitely not going to be setting any speed records, but he uses his 20 BST advantage to have tons of extra HP, attack, defense, and res. He also got his unique bow, which adds even more defensive power, and he can support his teammates too. This guy is going to be way harder to take down, and I'm sure if George was a colorless bow, a lot more people would invest in him. Now if we look at summonable low rarity units, Jorge kinda has one competitor. Norn is just an absolute beast for low rarity archers, and she can be used for all kinds of roles thanks to her good speed with balanced defensive spread. She's definitely a really good archer if you're looking for a merge project. Tanya is another option, but her lower BST does hurt her a little bit. Both Norn and Tanya have a rather balanced spread of stats, but they are both way faster than Jorge ever will be. For slower units, you could compare Jorge to high defense archers like Leon or Gordon, but both just have alpha res stats. They both have their own unique bows now though, so check them out. In conclusion, Jorge is a very unique archer. He has no direct competition since he's a blue archer, and his stats are just incredible for a tankier build, plus he has his own special bow as well. Now for builds, Jorge can definitely do fine on a budget. You could keep everything in his kit and just fill in that A slot with a stat booster if you're choosing. Something like Mirror Stance or Attack and Defense Bond would be nice since Jorge won't be a main offensive threat. Now for Sacred Seals, you can simply use Drive Attack 2, and that's going to grant another +3 attack to his allies within 2 spaces. With Daniel Made Bow, that's already +8 attack, which is really starting to stack up, and Attack Opening is going to give one of your allies +6 attack on top of that. If you don't want to work with field buffs, or you just want more buffs for everyone, then you can replace Attack Opening with another Drive Attack 2 skill. That would give Jorge a +11 attack aura around him, which is just kinda hilarious. It's a simple setup, but if it gets your teammates more KOs, then why not? For one more supportive option, Jorge could run Infantry Rush, which grants Heavy Blade 3 to allies within 2 spaces. You can find Infantry Rush on Brady, and pairing it with the Drive Attack seal, that's still going to give you +8 attack, and you have Heavy Blade for your allies. Someone like Brave Dimitri could have a lot of fun with that combo. Instead of support skills to improve Jorge's combat power, you could always have quicker post for that follow-up attack. Add in a good A skill, Sacred Seals like Distant Defense or Defensive Res Bond, plus Daniel Made Bow's -5 attack debuff, and Jorge is pretty ready to tank some hits. If you would prefer to counter a specific threat, Jorge could run a Sword Breaker set with something like Death Blow. That could let him snipe off sword units, and you could still run 2 support skills. If you want to dip into some premium skills, then Jorge can have a lot of fun as a support unit. He could make good use of the Rally plus Ruse combo since he can debuff enemies, buff allies, and he can still run 2 additional support skills, plus he's got his bow's +5 attack aura. While not something that will work on ranged threats, because Daniel Made Bow emits a 2-space attack debuff, Jorge can stand adjacent to an ally, and any melee foes they fight are going to get hit by his debuff. To further reduce the damage taken, you can add Close Guard and even double up on it with 1 Close Guard skill. That's another +4 defense and res against melee foes for your nearby allies, so if Jorge is sticking with his team, he can really mess with melee attackers. In addition, if we give Jorge a defense and res increasing skill like Fortress Defense and Res 3, then we can just make it tougher for him to get picked off. Now, there are some other support skills to consider. You can instead run the Link buffs for double +6 stat buffs, and any joint drive skill is great since Jorge already has that better drive attack effect. With his high base HP, Jorge could also run Sudden Panic or Panic Ploy if you need to deal with enemy field buffs. Last, I just want to cover some selfish builds for Jorge if you want him specifically to get in the fight. With his stat spread, Jorge can be a super budget version of Legendary Crom if you give him Close Counter or Close Foil. Obviously, he lacks Crom's annoying assist skill and will have a lot less damage, but Jorge can definitely take a lot of hits. With the low attack skills, Jorge would always inflict -8 attack debuffs on his foes and they get no attack field buffs, but that's just going to be it for himself. You can also add attack smoke for even more attack debuffs on top of that. Now, if you want to take up some other inheritable bows, Jorge could be really annoying with the Spendthrift bow since it has a bigger attack debuff and would give him more attack as well. Problem is that Jorge's special options become way more limited, and Daniel Made Bow accelerate specials, so that could offset the less attack in the first place. If you want to be crazy with something like a speed boon and a lot of merges, Jorge could run multiple speed increasing skills. The idea being that his defensive bulk is already really good to start with, so you have some room to spec into speed if you really want. I wouldn't say this is optimal by any means, but hey, a fast unit that is also decently tanky is just really annoying. Now, instead of speed or defensive stats, you could run with a plus attack boon and something like a Brave Bow build. Jorge has great base attack, so if you want a blue Brave Bow archer, well, he'll do just fine attack boon or not. You could run double death blow skills or have sturdy impact for some insurance. Jorge's default chill defense would also work fine just here. While these are fun builds to discuss, I would definitely say most builds will trend more toward a support/tank setup. Daniel Made Bow offers a lot of neat perks for team play, so I would definitely hold on to it for the sake of its uniqueness. So should you promote Jorge to 5 stars? Well, we discussed a lot of good points about him, and one of those are his base stats. Jorge has the highest base stat total for infantry archers and should usher in the next BST generation. He is incredibly bulky for an archer, and his unique Daniel Made Bow also inflicts a -5 attack debuff on foes, which further improves his survivability. Daniel Made Bow also accelerates specials and grants a +5 attack buff to nearby allies, so Jorge has some nice combative perks and will be a team player. His base kit also synergizes nicely with the chill defense and attack opening skills, just improving allied damage output. Overall, Jorge is a great reward unit. His biggest fault may be his blue color to some players, but tanky colored archers like Midori or Legendary Crom are still really annoying to deal with. Jorge has great stats everywhere except for speed, and even that is workable if you want to avoid some follow-up attacks. With his bow, you can simply have him as a big attack boosting ally, and you can have attack opening or drive attack depending on where you want the extra attack buffs going to. If you aren't planning to invest in Jorge, he could still be a fun unit to have around. If you just want extra attack, I would say the double drive attack setup is a really nice budget set, since that's plus 11 attack to all nearby allies, and that's just for any unit really. For those that invest heavily in Jorge with merges and maybe even getting him a specific boon, I definitely think he'll be able to hold his own. He's a contender for a close counter set, and you can also make him into a support bot that is just really tanky. I don't know how many people actually cared for this one NPC from Telius, but Jorge came prepared, and I like what he offers as a reward unit. That's going to be it for this video. Do let me know what you think about Jorge, and I do think he's worth 5-starring if you have a surplus of feathers lying around. Very happy with how Jorge turned out as a unit, and I'm sure someone will turn him into a really tanky fighter for the memes. Good luck beating his Grand Hero battle, and I'll see you guys in the next video.